Hey everybody, it is Eric, it is Nick. We are back from the Kim Harmon Scrotium 500 at Road Atlanta. Now, this prompts a couple of questions. First, who is Kim Harmon? She is our event coordinator, ops manager, all around, makes everything happen at the races. That's hella sweet. And what is Scrotium? Well,
you can wrap your shoes with bed sheets, but that doesn't keep your scrotum warm.
Can't we go one video without using the word scrotium?
No.
Scrotium?
Is that a new element?
That's my favorite element.
Yeah.
What the hell is
Scrotium 134
Yeah.
is the isotope. They keep your feet warm okay, but there's the problem of your scrotum
Can't
staying
we go
kind
one video without saying
Kinda.
the word scrotium?
now at her own race, Kim waved all the cars off of the grid, she waved the checkered flag, and she also gave out some Spirit of Scrotium trophies. That was hella sweet too.
Now, Kim also found a bunch of circa 1980 photos from Road Atlanta on the internet, including this one of the pace car at the time. Now, he said, hey, that car that was exotic enough to be a pace car in 1980 is the same car that's right over there in this Lemons race. We showed the photo to the team captain. He made a Sharpie replica of the graphics. That was hella sweet.
It was close to Christmas, so I donned my finest Christmas attire, not expecting to see that Ed White was wearing the exact same thing.
I know you're going to put me in Class B, so this is real.
Actual real race car driver Sarah Montgomery was on hand to serve as a judge, and as always, she did an awesome job. She really enjoys the opportunity to tell other race car drivers what she really thinks of their skills.
The 2021 edition of the Kim Harmon Scrotium 500 was perhaps a little marred by bad driving, even by Lemon standards, so we made a point during the drivers' meeting of reiterating that we were going to implement penalties harshly and frequently during the race, and it kind of worked, but it still gave us the chance to dole out some great penalties. Those include classics like the Bart Simpson and Assemble a Puzzle as a Team. Turned out we have some not great puzzle doers in Lemons. We also had the classic Apologize from the Roof while you're saran wrapped to your car, and a twist on that where we had a hot dog costume and drivers had to have words that kind of work with that milieu.
Don't be like me, I stepped on my wiener. Don't be like me, I stepped on my wiener. Don't be like me, I stepped on my wiener.
And lastly, number 322, the 8 Hicks team. They race a Malibu, which is hella sweet on its own. They also built us a slot car track that looks a lot like Road Atlanta. And some penalized teams had to run that in the slot cars without flipping off the track.
Hella sweet, Thin Blue Swine and their Ford Thunderbird. Now, team captain Bruce Jansen adores this car, probably more than any other Lemons team captain I've ever met, and we love that about him. It's also the second one of the 24 Hours of Lemons Johnny Lightning die casts, and you can buy that right now, I think. But more importantly, Bruce collected toys for tots at this race and raised over $1,800 on his own, plus collected more from other teams to give to kids who need presents for Christmas. That was hella sweet, and just for good measure, Bruce won Class C, so not a bad weekend for Thin Blue Swine.
At this race, there was some pretty good representation from the multi-brand conglomerate Stellantis. Now, this is a giant arrangement that includes prestige brands, and at Road Atlanta, we had a lot of representatives from arguably the worst Stellantis brands of them all. First, we had Rad Dad Racing in a Dodge Caravan. For starters, it's a round body era Caravan. It's also full of soft little white pellets. Were they spider eggs? We'll let the team decide about that. Anyway, they bribed us with a totally not just bought at the corner gas station surprise birthday party. I wouldn't say that the Caravan was, well driven, but the van did run better in this, their second race. It's always hella sweet to see it. Looking forward to seeing them in 2023.
The next Stellantis entry was Winded Warriors Racing and their Dodge Dakota. Now, this is a purebred racing machine, and it came with the original 2.5-liter AMC 4-cylinder engine, which blew up in their last race. And the team captain, Chris, emailed me and said, "Boy, we're thinking about putting a different motor in it, maybe a Chrysler 318, maybe an LS motor, maybe just the Dakota V6. But ultimately, they came to the conclusion, hey, what if we built the hell out of this motor?" And they went and built a Stroker 3.1-liter version of it that makes like 220 horsepower. Now, shockingly, this engine build actually worked, and it did the one thing that I don't think they expected, which is blew the transmission into many small pieces. So, welcome to engine swap hell, Winded Warriors.
Obviously, also from Stellantis, another Dodge Dakota. This one was from Hee Haw Racing, and they installed their own engine swap, which was a 360 V8 from a Dodge van. They did no other modifications, and it came out perfect.
Another Stellantis product, a recent Stellantis product, the Folly from Mount Holly's Dodge Charger. It's got a Hemi.
And another Stellantis entry was from NSF Racing. Now, NSF out of Florida, they might have a bit of a reputation for not having everything ready on time. For this race, they were originally registered with a real 1971 Mach 1 Mustang YU Rune Classic. Now, that car wasn't done. Why? Well, team captain Bob was traveling for work, so he left the final prep details to Sasha from Team Sputnik. Now, Sasha has a bit of a reputation for being overzealous with a Sawzall, and when Bob returned from his trip, well, the Mustang was in more pieces than it should have been. Now, another thing that NSF didn't get around to was crushing their previous Lemons car. Now, this was a Chrysler Sebring that raced on Mother's Day at Sebring. They raced it in that event and said, okay, as soon as we get home, we're crushing this horrible piece of Instead, they parked it behind their shed and never got around to crushing it. So now the Mustang is in a million pieces. They need a car to race. They dragged the Sebring out, and it ran perfectly.
Yeah, well.
Now, that's not all of the Stellantis products, but we're going to move on to General Motors, our second favorite punching bag in the automotive world. And we'll start with Tormented Racing in their Chevy Camaro IROC. And yes, it is a real Camaro IROC, YU Rune Classic. Now, this car had done about 12 laps in 2 races, and this time they failed tech for having expired seatbelts. They found some replacements, so naturally we let them celebrate in the only way that IROC owners know how.
Number 323, Chev Mullet Racing and their Chevy El Camino. Now, they were in the top 10 overall to start the day on Sunday. Now, even at the beginning of Sunday, there's a long way to go. They knew that and made sure to get the day off on the right foot.
One more General Motors point worth mentioning, we had three red Saturn SC2s at this race, all the same spec, the same engine, but with different mechanical problems. The number 132 Apollo 13 B team welded their brake caliper cylinder onto the brake pads, and that was butt terrible. The Lem Oktoberfest SC2 leaked oil all over the track at kind of an alarming rate. And in the end, the rookie Decent Fellas Racing managed to finish an impressive 43rd place as the best red Saturn SC2.
Another really well-represented brand was Volkswagen. In fact, at one point, we had 4 Volkswagens in the penalty box at the same time. Included in that group was Retro Racing, Johan and Steve's horrible Beetle. It did its usual thing, which is to say they blew up the good motor. They threw in the backup motor. The backup motor is way better than the good motor. It ran so well, they were driving so fast that they shot off the track into the gravel at high speeds.
Another Volkswagen worth mentioning, Chaos Racing and their Mark I Rabbit. Now, this car didn't even get to tech inspection at NCM, so they fared a little bit better. The car ran off and on, except the part where the driver forgot how to get the car into gear on the track. Luckily, the safety truck driver was there to help out.
And then I had to teach him how to use the clutch, the brake, and the gas so the car would quit rolling backwards. So basically I told him, when you feel it start pulling, just floor it. Take off. And he did.
Then you had Foco Racing and the Hans Am. This was a Volkswagen Golf. If you're ever at a loss of how to theme your Lemons car, even if it's a Volkswagen Golf, make it a 77 Trans Am.
All right, you talk me into it.
One last Volkswagen to mention was Frank's Mobile Jet Ski Service, which were some rookie motorcycle racers in a Volkswagen Golf. Now, this car had failed axles midway through Saturday, which is a foreign concept for motorcycle racers, but not for most Volkswagen teams. They discovered when trying to swap it out that it requires a special socket just to get the axle out. It took them hours to even figure out that there was a special tool needed. Luckily, the Audi TT guys at the track had those.
Now, it wasn't all doom and gloom at Road Atlanta. We had some hella sweet things happening. First, we had Cheatin' Slow in their BMW E36. They sponsored a youth hockey league with their racing, and Cheatin' Slow is such a great message for the kids.
Hella Sweet, our Watch This Losers friends of Breaking Bad, broke the tab on their rear diff with about 90 minutes left. They said, "No problem, we got this," and everybody around them started looking at them a little skeptically, because that's a major repair, and they did it in about 40 minutes. That was hella sweet.
Also hella sweet was Lemon Slug Racing. This car is number 831, which is the area code for Santa Cruz, California. Why is that significant? Well, this team is made up of UC Santa Cruz students. Now, I went to UC Santa Cruz, and Jay went to UC Santa Cruz. Last year they were signed up for a race at Sonoma, which is, 2 hours from Santa Cruz. Well, they couldn't get their Ford Focus ready for that race. So between then and now, one of their team members got a job in Kansas, took the car with them. Now, that's super close to Road Atlanta.
Yes, well!
No problem, they towed the 30 hours to the track, got their car ready, it ran, it blew up, but they were still pumped to be there.
Yeah, Team Non Sequitur was at this race. This is a group of brothers and a friend of theirs who have been racing with us since 2007 at Flat Rock. Now, for the first time, they were leading the race overall way late into the race, and then they racked up 3 quick black flags. And they weren't even mad about it because they hated how much pressure it takes to lead and win even a crappy Lemons race. Third place feels a lot more comfortable.
Now, Lemons has been around so long that we're starting to see this thing where longtime Lemons racers are putting their teenage kids into Lemons races. Ragged Racing has been around racing C4 Corvettes for years, including one with a LS swap from a Chevy truck in it. The team captain wisely decided not to put his 16-year-old son and his friend in the LS-powered Corvette. Instead, they put them in the Miata-powered Borgward Isabella. Guess what? The Borgward, with engine by Mazda, ran fine and the kids stayed out of trouble. Want to keep your terrible driving teenagers out of harm's way? Give them a Borgward.
Our Yokohama Tires Road Mangler Cup winners was Red Balls Racing and their Saab 9.3, which is a couple of rookies, and it was actually kind of quick, so must be the tires.
Okay, on to the winners. We normally don't mention class winners, but we've got to put a spotlight on the Class B winner, which was Dan Albritton. He did this by himself with just a little bit of help from his team.
To be clear, Dan, not a normal human being. For starters, he wanted to do this at all, which is pretty crazy. And he thought about this idea a few years ago. Then he began actually doing physical endurance training last year just to prepare for this. In his warm-up, well, he rode a motorcycle solo in the 2022 Baja 1000, which he wanted to point out numbers are still hard in real racing. And To this point, it's probably true that riding a motorcycle solo through the Mexican desert for 1,000 miles is a little more challenging than Lemons.
Now, when you're Ironmanning a Lemons race more or less by yourself, you need to convince the team to operate as your support staff. They'll shove peanut butter sandwiches down your throat while you're running to the porta potty during pit stops. He had another bathroom method which was less desirable, if we're being honest.
So congrats to Dan, we guess? Heroic Fix went to Team Beam Dream Team and their Subaru WRX. Now this is a group of drifters who scored this crappy WRX and put a Toyota Beams engine in it, Why You Ruin Classic. They have blown up multiple differentials, a clutch, transmission or four, but before this race, they scored a truckload of Mazda RX-8 transmissions for $50 a piece, and you can't pass that kind of deal up when you're a drifter, so they did what anybody would do in this situation. They cut the bell housings in half and just welded the RX-8 transmission right onto the engine. Who needs expensive adapter plates? Just cut and paste that.
Amazingly, this worked just fine. In fact, their biggest issue was a broken throttle cable. Well, when this thing snapped, they knew they needed a very narrow, thin cable. They just sort of looked around the paddock and, hey, look, the team captain's got a pit bike, which is a Huffy. That's quality. So they disassembled the Huffy's brakes, installed the throttle cable. It worked great. The car is now a Subaru with a Toyota motor, Mazda transmission, and Huffy brake parts. Now, meanwhile, their pit neighbors in the crowd control Mustang kept having problems where their exhaust was falling apart. So the Beam Dream Team guys were going over there to help the Mustang folks with their exhaust. Turns out the Mustang people are drifters also. They were doing the welding wearing Kim-approved welding tutus. Now they've got new drift/Lemons buddies. That's what this is all about. It's hella sweet.
I Got Screwed went to Goes Like Hell in their real Shelby Charger, $500 my ass. Now, they've spent years futzing with this thing using turbo and non-turbo 1980s Chrysler engines to no avail. So last year they re-engineered the car using the twin cam engine out of a Neon RT. That's beating the system. Suffice to say, these engines aren't known for lasting great in Lemons races, and after blowing up the transmission last year, this year the engine spun a rod bearing, or 4 of them. So they spent some time searching on the internet and they found a Neon RT motor in the junkyard nearby. They rushed to get there. They had it halfway pulled when the junkyard was closing for the day. The yard manager shooed them away and said, "No engine for you," and therefore they got 4 laps for the weekend.
Now, the special award was We Couldn't Do This Without You, which went to Un Gringo Racing and their Datsun 280ZX. Now, anybody who's been to a Lemons race knows Lemons events have a way of, let's say, taxing a racetrack's septic facilities. This team is made up of employees of Nix, which is the company that services Road Atlanta's porta potties. The team captain Clay's teammates all speak Spanish. He does not, hence the team Un Gringo. And the Nix truck showed up repeatedly throughout the weekend and took care of our business.
That alone would put them in the running for a trophy, but the car itself is every bit as awesome. Now, Clay is a Datsun Z-car guy.
Steve Wozniak owns 2 of the world's most impressive sports cars. What's your favorite, Steve?
I prefer the Z.
But he didn't really dive too deeply into his own parts for this one. Instead, he traded septic pumping services for the rolling shell of his 280ZX. The engine was something he'd had sitting around, so he threw it in the car, but his teammates are Ford guys and they really wanted to put their stamp on it. So they used a 1-barrel carb off a 1970s Ford Pinto. It was still curing the JB weld when they came through tech. It only fell off like once, kind of just ran for the weekend. Spectacular.
Judge's choice went to Total Depravity and their Jeep Grand Cherokee. Now, this Cherokee debuted last year. We loved everything about it. It was literally the first car they found for $500, and they said, yep, that'll work. They installed safety equipment, and it ran without a single hitch. This year, they brought it back with a new theme. It was a tank, which is fitting for a vehicle the size of a Grand Cherokee.
Unlike last year, they had some, let's say, driving problems. They racked up a few black flags, and Judge Sarah also noticed that their seat belts were not really fitting them in the seats. They did some penalties, they went and they fixed their belts, they learned from all of these mistakes and ran completely clean after that. So it's worth pointing out, 2 races, 0 mechanical issues. Forget your Ford 5-liter, forget your LS swap, go get a Chrysler 4.7-liter V8 if you need a swap.
Organizer's choice went to the youngsters, and much like the Grand Cherokee team, these rookies found the first $500 car they could, which was an '86 Fiero sitting in some lady's yard. The 3 guys on this team couldn't have been more than about 20. They're everything we want this series to be about. They're funny, they've got a good vibe, they've got a good attitude, and they wrote hilarious Spanish phrases all over their car in Sharpie.
Now, at one point we saw them stalled after they had spun the car on the track, and they ended up getting towed in, so we asked them, what was going on? And they told us, well, our ignition key had come off the rope. We were like, what are you even talking about? Here you go. These guys were awesome. Please keep bringing us super janky Pontiac Fieros.
The eBay Motors Halloween Meets Gasoline prize, $1,000 to the best theme. It goes to Disciples of Gru and their Honda Civic. We expected more costumes than we really got for this event, especially considering the race's name, proximity to the holidays, etc. Nevertheless, this newbie team dressed as a Minions and had a super proper Minion grade setup. That is to say, the cabin had absolutely no gauges whatsoever and only had a power inverter to feed their turbocharger.
Now, that turbocharger was, of course, a Ryobi shop van. The team was captained by one dude who knew what he was doing and a bunch of his friends who had no clue, including one of them who was learning how to drive stick the first time he went out into the race car. When it ran, it was slow as hell. These guys are awesome. Their costumes are awesome. Their car is awesome. We cannot wait to see them back.
The Index of Effluency was awarded to Jeff Gorton's Racing. This, of course, is the Gorton Fish Stick / Jeff Gordon NASCAR mashup that first showed up in digital form a couple years ago in Lemon's iRacing. Now it's racing for real. It would be awesome to see this theme on any car, but on a real, honest-to-Dale Monte Carlo Z34, that's perfection. Forget your LFX, forget your L67, this is the ultimate form of the GM sound of power. It's a normal-ass 3.4 V6, but topped with super sophisticated dual overhead cam cylinder heads.
We had low expectations for a GM product with so many moving parts, but 2 races in, this thing just freaking runs. It's astonishing, not fast, but astonishing, and they came 2 laps short of finishing in 24th with lap times in the bottom 20 cars. That is the heartbeat of America, and this is Lemons in a nutshell.
Every second you don't subscribe or watch one of these videos, another Vega is sent to the crusher. Won't you help us save Classic?